I've always considered Fabiano Caruana to be an extremely dangerous player who is tremendously accurate. You know, the way he plays chess, he's very, very well deserved world number two because he can calculate well. His opening preparation is up to the mark. He has that fighting spirit. There are a lot of things that are right about him. But he was facing the in-form Alireza Firouzja. And this happened in the ninth round of the FIDE Grand Swiss 2021. Now, Alireza was on 6.5 points, Fabiano Caruana on 5.5. So it was a must win for Fabi. He opened the game with 1 e4. Now, Alireza, the problem with him, or you can see the good thing or problem, whatever, is that he always loves to fight. You know, if he was more, how do you say, with more experience, maybe he would have gone for something more solid, but he went for the Caro Kann, which is a solid opening, but also at the highest level, there are ways for white to fight for an advantage, get a more imbalanced game, e5, bishop f5, h4. And the idea, of course, is to gain more space with g4. So h5 was played, bishop d3, takes, and generally, like, you know, if you think about it, because these pawns are on dark squares, this exchange in itself is kind of incorrect because you are exchanging your good bishop for your opponent's bad bishop. And e6 would be coming up next when the other bishop would be better than the white bishop on c1. But as we had a grandmaster chess session with Jan Sistov Duda, and he explained it very nicely. He said that nowadays space advantage has more importance often than what it was understood before. And even the engines tend to give white a slightly better position here. Now there are two ways to continue. One is e6. The other one is queen a5. Alireza went for queen a5. It scores slightly better than e6. And here Caruana played the move knight d2. Now it's important to play knight d2. The reason is, I'll just explain to you. One of the main ideas of queen a5 check is to put your queen on a6 and offer a queen trade. But here it is incorrect because white has a good move. Can you find it? e6. Absolutely right. And after queen takes d3. By the way, if you take fe6, then queen g6 is already curtains. White is winning. So queen d3, you take e takes f7 check, king takes, pawn takes on d3. And now what happens is that this knight goes to f3, the other knight goes to h3. They are looking at the g5 square, the e5 square, and also the d4 square is protected by the knight on f3. So just as an example, knight d7, knight f3, knight h6, knight h3, knight f5, check, and castles, and white is better here. Now, imagine that when opponent plays bd2 and you play queen a6, now e6, take, and cd3. The difference is that the bishop is on d2, so the knight d2, knight f3 maneuver is slightly difficult. And here black is doing very well after, let's say, knight d7, knight f3, knight h6. I want to play, let's say, check, king here, bishop c3, defending the pawn, getting ready for getting my knight to f3. But knight f5, knight d2, and this one tempo which is lacking gives black a great position here. Black to move, what do? e5. Very nice. You are in time and you can't even take this pawn because d4 traps the bishop. So you see, these are the subtleties in the opening variation which I want you to know. Knight d2 is the correct move here and a good move. e6 now by Alireza, so that now there is no e6 ideas in the position. ne2 by Fabi. And now knight went to e7. You could also play queen a6 here directly, and most likely c4 would be played. And I think one of the lines goes like bishop b4, b3, and white doesn't allow the queen trade and that endgame, which is comfortable for black. So knight e7, here b4 is what Fabiano played. It's a novelty. and he played it pretty quickly, so he had prepared it. Now if you take here, then after rook b1, white is better. He will win the pawn on b7. So that's the reason he went queen a6, and you do not trade the queens. Queen b3, knight f5. And here's a small question to you. I hope you are tactically alert. Why is a4 a bad move in this position? Think. The reason it's bad is because of queen e2 takes and knight d4 when there is a fork and black has won a very important pawn on d4. So Fabiano played knight to f3, defending the pawn, very logical. Knight d7, a4, and now queen came to c4. bd2, he took, pawn takes, and here Alireza went f6. Now there is also another way to play this position which is more solid, like you go bishop e7. You maybe try to just play around with your pieces, maybe maneuver the knight back to c7, try to get ready. But Alireza is a very active player, and he tries to create his play with f6, castles, and bishop e7, g3, just strengthening his position, king f7. Everything is going fine. Rook fe1. He now took. Again, taking here, I'm not sure. You could even play like bd8, bishop c7. Try to wait in this position. But he took, pawn takes, rook a c8, knight f3, and now came the move d4, which was a mistake. The move d4 is a mistake because first of all, this pawn becomes slightly weak. Also, white has knight d3, rook c1. Many ways in which he can continue playing in this position. Also, a5, a6 is in the air. He can create many threats. So the move d4 in general is not good. Black has to play a waiting game with g6. Maybe move his rook here, rook e8, pull the king away. There are many other ways to play. Of course, you have to care about your e6 pawn, but the move d4 was active, and I would say it was not something that you can condemn Alireza for playing. He's always playing actively, but Caruana now started to get the advantage. First, rook c1, c5 was played, and now Fabi was in his element. White to play. What do you do here? He found the move knight to d5, and this is very well spotted. It's an unusual tactic because if you take, there is e6 followed by picking up the knight, and white is better. If you try to save your bishop here with something like bishop f8, then knight g5 is just killing in the position because now you no longer can come to e7. This is hanging. And if you try to go bishop d8, which is another possible move, then bishop g5 looks very strong. So knight d5, cb4 was played in the position by black. Now came knight to e7, knight to e7. And here Caruana had to play the move bishop b4. The point being that knight c6 now is met with bishop d6, and white has complete control on the position. His e5 pawn is safe. What happened was that he went knight g5, and while it looks a very natural move after king g6, the e5 pawn is slightly weakened now with the knight no longer defending it. So if you were, he took, and if you were now to take bishop b4, the problem is that knight c6 not only hits the bishop, but also the pawn. And if you now go bishop to d6, then already, there are many ways to continue. King f5 could be one of them. And black is doing very well in this position. So after rook c8, he didn't take on b4. He played knight e6. And here Caruana played a very, Alireza played a very good move, knight c6, defending his pawn on b4 and also on d4. e5 is also hanging. So he went f4. King went to f5. And he took knight g7 check. King went back. Knight came here. King here. And this is where it started becoming clear that this game is getting very exciting. Because if, let's say, Caruana was maybe leading the tournament, he would have perhaps gone for a draw. But because he was a point behind, he said, I'll go knight g5. But the moment you move your knight away, this square is now taken by the black knight. So while you are a pawn down as black, you have activity, your knight is well placed, your king is well placed, and there are many things going in your favor. So knight f7 was played in this position, and once again there could have been a repetition with this way, but Fabi was fighting. He went knight d6, rook g8, trying to attack here on g3, king g2. Nice move, king d5. I like this move very much, because if you take the pawn on b3, which is the most natural move, f5 comes in, and then when you go king d5, then here comes a strong move, knight e4, with the threat of knight f6 check with a fork, and it's already getting quite dangerous for black. So that's why Firouzja quickly went king d5, stopping f5, because now the e5 pawn would hang. Rook b1 was a passive move, but what to do? Knight to e4, he took, king takes, and for one pawn, black king is tremendously active. Here I thought that if someone's better, it should be black, but Caruana first played rook c1, king came in to d3, bishop e1, and I think here maybe even in spite of king d3 being active, perhaps a5 was also possible, keeping the king also somewhere close to the white pawn so that they don't start running away. King d3, bishop e1, king e2 was a mistake, because now white has to find the only move that will help him to get an advantage here, and Caruana did find it. White to play, what do you do? e6. And now the lines get very exciting. First, if you play d3, which he did in the game, f5. And if you go d2, by the way, here's a beautiful line. I'll take. And now we know that if two pawns are on the 6th rank, then they are stronger than a rook. But you don't need the knight here, so you just chop it off and you play f6 and you're winning. Very nice, very pretty line. So here, f5, he went for the move knight d4. Yeah, maybe rook e8 was better, but okay, knight d4 made some sense. He wants to attack this pawn. He took here, and now there is a rook e1 mate. So if you take knight f5, you are checkmated. So you have to play the move d2. Now once you play the move d2, I take, king takes, and now came the move rook to c5. This was a beautiful move that was played by Fabi. This was where 40 moves have been completed and he had 50 more minutes. Rook f1 was also possible, but the reason why rook c5 is better is because let's just look at this line which goes rook e8, and now you can start with rook e5 as in the game, threatening e7 and f6. So if you would have started with rook f1 and he goes rook e8, you can no longer get your rook on the e file to get e7 and f6. So rook c5, rook e8, rook e5. He went king d3. And knight c6 was also possible when there was maybe rook d5 check here. And game continues, but he went king d3. And a very good move, king f2. Rook e7, and now Caruana in his element creates another passer with g4. Very strong move. H g4, king g3. Rook went back, king takes g4, and after knight c6, he figured that he doesn't even need to save his rook. He went king f4, because if you take, this is winning after f6, f7. So he played knight e7, f6. Here, king f5, gives a pawn, attacks, fork, king back, knight d4, and after e7, it was all over. Knight c6, f7, took here, and a check. Next move, you are about to queen, and Alireza resigned. What a tremendous game this was by Fabi, and really beautifully played. I think there was another interesting line which I wanted to discuss here. Was it at some other moment? Yeah, maybe it started with, no, if I play d2, there is this and this, but yeah, maybe rook e8, correct, rook e8. And this is a beautiful line which I want you to calculate. Try to pause this video and try to think what should white do here. It's a beautiful line. So the move is rook takes c6, and it's so nicely working out. Firstly, if you take king e1, I have rook d6, and if you play d2, I have f6, and if you take here, then I have rook e6 check. So you have to play d1, I take, and e7, white wins. So rook c6, bc6, now bishop b4, d2, you take this pawn, take this, and now although these two pawns haven't reached the 6th rank and you can't push them, the h pawn, sorry, yeah, bishop b4, d2, bishop d2, king e2, the h pawn comes to the rescue with g4, takes h5, and it all works perfectly. h6, king e4, and now you play the move f6, only winning move, takes f7 here, and h7, and white wins. So this entire game can be summarized with this one variation, and it's also Fabiano's playing style. It's very concrete. He plays it very with a lot of energy, a lot of excellent calculation. And after this game, the FIDE Grand Swiss is completely wide open. You know, anyone can win it. And if we now look at the pairing for the round 10, it is very clear that this tournament can go anyway. Like Firouzja versus Howell, Caruana versus MVL. We have Shashikiran versus Esipenko, Vityugov, Oparin, Shirov, Yu Yangi, Predke, Anton, Savian, Sargisian. Everyone looking for that one spot in the candidates. I mean, 2 spots actually. But let's see how it ends. This is very exciting, and I hope you enjoyed this game. This is Sagar Shah signing off. Bye bye.